My name is Alessandra Di Maio. I know some of you. I've been curating this Black Italia series this year. There were quite a few interesting events last semester. This is, one of the final events before the series is over. The one tonight is filming the Mediterranean crossing south and north of Lampedusa. And tonight with us there are two filmmakers, ANDREA SEGRE and DAGMAWI YIMER, who have filmed some documentaries about migration in Italy, about crossing the Mediterranean. And we're going to watch one of them tonight called Come un uomo sulla terra, like a man on earth, which they co-directed, and they will tell us more about this documentary. But in the meantime, let me introduce briefly both of them to you. DAGMAWI YIMER is a filmmaker and a photographer. He was born and raised in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and he left his country after the 2005 post-election unrest, in which hundreds of young people were killed and put in jail. So after a long journey across the Libyan desert and the Mediterranean, he landed, as we say in Italian, on the island of Lampedusa on July 30th, 2006. And partially this is going to be the subject of the documentary that we're going to watch tonight. So he took the trip, for those of you who came to the previous events, I talked a bit about the Black Mediterranean, about burning the sea, which is the idiom that they use especially in the Arabophone world, about crossing the sea, from North Africa to the southern shores of Europe. This crossing is called the burning, and it's got, different implications to talk about burning the Mediterranean. So he did it. And he's now based in Verona with his family, with his wife, partner, and a little girl. And little boy, I've learned today. When he arrived in Italy, he was in Rome for a while, right? How long were you in Rome? For like 1 year? Oh, wow, 4 years. And he participated in a video workshop, if we can call it like that, Andrea taught or managed, and they will tell us more about this. In any case, after having participated in this workshop, he co-authored the film Like a Man on Earth, Come un uomo sulla terra, which we're going to watch tonight. And so it's a product, it's a fruit of a very unique collaboration in that sense. So this is a documentary that was done in 2008, and many other documentaries, several other documentaries followed. One of them is Cara Italia, Dear Italy, by the pun is on C-A-R-A, Cara, which is one of the kinds of centers, detention centers, migration centers. In Italian we call them centri d'accoglienza, with a very specific idiom that is recognized as such, by the ministers in Italy. And Soltanto il Mare is another documentary, and several other short films were directed by DAGMAWI. In 2011, he coordinated a collective film project, Benvenuti in Italia. Are you familiar with this at all? Has anybody seen it? No? And directed one of the 5 episodes. And his latest documentary, released in 2014, is called Va Pensiero, Storia Ambulante. Va Pensiero is, of course, a sentence, a line from inspired by Verdi's Nabucodonosor, by the famous aria, which is a chorus sung by an ensemble of voices representing the captive Jews in Babylon. So that's also a very, evocative title. And in all his films, especially in this latest one, there are racially motivated aggressions. And in this latest film, right? Could you call it a documentary? No? Maybe yes, maybe not. It's the same. 2 stories are linked about, racial aggression in Milan and another one in Florence. And this film has been, widely awarded. And I know, for instance, that il Festival di Cinema Africano in Milan gave you a special award for that. And, maybe you can tell us also more about the reception of your work in Italy. Let me introduce also ANDREA SEGRE, who's a filmmaker, and in my personal opinion, but not only mine, one of the most original and committed and active of his generation. He's a director of film and documentaries for cinema and television. Some of you might have seen his latest documentary on Rai 3, right, a few months ago, Come il peso dell'acqua. He's also a researcher in sociology of communication, and for over 10 years has been particularly dedicated to the topic of migration and integration in Italy. He's also the founder of an association, a foundation, I suppose, Zalab, where he develops both production projects and participatory video workshops, which is also, I think, an interesting project of yours that is now a reality, Zalab, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about this too later. He's got quite a few documentaries on the crossing, again, on the burning of the sea, of the Mediterranean Sea, beginning, from filming the crossing of the Sahara Desert in his first documentary on this topic, if I'm correct, which is a Sud di Lampedusa, south of Lampedusa, which is, where we got the title today, filming the Mediterranean crossing south and north of Lampedusa. We all think that Lampedusa is, the center of this very complicated migration pattern, but, migrations are really more complicated than that. It's not just about the landing. There is really a history before, the sea crossing, and this is what is documented in south of Lampedusa. And the second one is Come uomo sulla terra, which they both directed in 2008. The third is Sangue Verde, on the green blood, on the riots in Rosarno. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. There is this little small town in Calabria where at some point, some African Italians revolted. They worked there as tomato pickers in very disgraceful conditions, and there was a revolt, and there was a huge turmoil, and, he documented this. And two of his latest documentaries on this topic, because he's done many other works and also, fiction films. But the two that I'm referring to are Mare Chiuso, released in 2012, and the latest Come il peso dell'acqua, 2014. And you directed some of these with other collaborators. You researched, at least, with other people, which I find also particularly intriguing. One of your collaborators is Stefano Liberti, who also is a journalist, a writer, and you already worked on south of Lampedusa with him, right? And on Mare Chiuso. So this is also very interesting. When we watch a documentary, we think that there is only one big person behind it, but actually many times, these are like products of collaborations, differently from, for instance, a novel. I mean, even a novel can be a fruit of collaboration, but, in a documentary, in a film production, this is way more evident, and I think it's important to underline that. And tomorrow, DAGMAWI and ANDREA will have a workshop on this, also on the more practical aspects of documentary production. So if you're interested, please join us, and the flyer is going around. So I don't want to say much more about your films, because I think it would be great to watch Come uomo sulla terra beforehand, and then perhaps the way we can conduct our roundtable is that we open it up to you guys with questions and answers to the directors. But if you have any impellent questions now, we can do that too. What would you prefer? Watch a movie? Va bene. Ok, grazie.
Is there anything that we should know before we start watching?
Lots of things. I don't know how much you know about the story of migration from Africa to Italy, but it's very important to locate the film in a specific historical moment. And everything changed a lot from that time, but everything what changed is based on what happened at that time. So it's somehow, and also maybe it's the reasons why we did it. It's somehow an important memory to understand what is still going on. But what is still going on is going on in a very different context, because everything changed politically, historically, on both sides of the Mediterranean Sea. And so don't think to watch something that is happening now, but think that is something that is important to know, to understand what is happening now. That is my suggestion.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. And
I don't know, because every time I'm in an American university, I don't know which is the background of the students I'm speaking about with. I don't know if you have a science, political science or social or filmmaking background, or.
Do you want to introduce yourselves very quickly as we're like around?
Answer that question. What is your background?
I'm currently working on a project to document the stories of like the street vendors in Florence. So I've had a lot of interaction with immigrants, mostly from Nigeria and Senegal, whose stories are different from those that come from Eritrea, and have to take that journey. But we did work with Emma Vitelli a lot, and Emma Vitelli has wrote a bit about this as well. So.
Do you work with them in which way?
I'm interviewing them to get their life
as
story.
a research, sociological research, or as a film documentary?
For just to write as a kind of like a book about their stories. We're hoping that we'll be able to publish it and have students read it before they come to Florence, so they have more of a context of like what's actually going on in the city and like familiarity, so that there's been a lot of like I've noticed like the attitude towards street vendors isn't particularly charitable at all times. So we're hoping to like kind of change that impression and like the interaction between student and vendor on the streets.
Okay.
So that's
Claudia.
I studied politics, human rights and development here at NYU, and my thesis is actually on immigration.
Okay.
And so I'm studying the push factors from places like the Middle East and North Africa that are sending all these immigrants and refugees here to Italy. I mean, Italy is really just a bridge to Europe.
Okay.
And you have organized a conference.
You're the one.
I feel like I'm your agent here.
Yeah, and so I've worked really hard to put on this dialogue that will be on Monday. It really explores what happens when these refugees arrive in Italy. So we hear so much about these shipwrecks and about everything that's occurring in their journey to Italy, but what happens when they get here? Who handles their asylum requests? Are they treated humanely? And who are the main actors, like the International Organization for Migration and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and what their role is in all of it?
And you know the answer. Basically.
If only that's what we're solving on in 2 hours on Monday. Like she said, it's a very complex issue, but I think bringing awareness to students is one step towards better understanding. Yeah.
I study sports management, so it doesn't really have anything to do with this. But in my cultures and context class, we're studying a lot of about immigrant to Italy and the reactions and relationships they're having. So I thought it'd be interesting, and none of my class showed up. So
You're the
a little
representative.
preview, summary of what happened.
Good.
Oh yeah, I'm also a student. The only thing, I'm not studying about this in class, but what I've learned about Italian immigration has come from the Pietra Dialogues program and the Black Italia series. So I've learned a lot just from being here and being in Italy and listening to all the other voices that have been adding to the conversation. So I'm just interested.
Okay.
And Ima, as Ophelia mentioned, Ima Vitelli came twice so
She's
far.
coming next week.
She's also coming next week with 2 young survivors of the Lampedusa 2013 crash. She's bringing them back for the students to meet what their passage was after they survived Lampedusa. And she did, her first talk was on her series in Vanity Fair. So they're pretty educated on this.
So they're ready.
Yeah, I'm definitely not there yet.
Yeah, well, it's
you know, more
Good
than
start.
many Italians, you know, many Italian students know about this, you know, we're talking a lot about this year.
Well, I was a student last year. I'm at the University of Michigan now, and I have a background in Italian studies and film studies as well. And I know nothing about immigration from Northern Africa or from Eastern Europe into Italy besides what I read in the New York Times. So not much.
And why are you here?
I'm here because I'm organizing the jury for the Middle East Now Film Festival, which is going on, as I'm sure you know, starting from tonight through the next week downtown. And we're awarding one of the awards for the festival, which is the prize for Best Short Film.
So NYU current students are awarding the prize.
Okay.
And Jim was one of the students that was on the panel last year awarding the prize in the festival. So we asked him to come back and help the students this year.
And I have to leave lunch.
Okay.
Okay, please. Try this.
Every time I see it, I think that, you know, I'm going to be fine. And I think this has been, you know, for me, the most emotional, you know, viewing. And I don't usually speak about emotions, but I think it's because you guys are here. You know, it makes a difference to see that, you know, you were working on this for how long?
But actually, we started to work together more than 1 year before this film, because the workshop, the first workshop where we met, took place in 2007, in the spring 2007, and then we started to work on this film 1 year later. No? Because the first year we realized another documentary, but not with the idea of distributing it, was simply the product of the workshop, called Il deserto e il mare, The Desert and the Sea. It's a collective documentary realized by the students of the workshop, and DAGMAWI was one of the students, and all the students were refugees who came to Italy through this journey. Then in the same school we realized that the stories of the journeys were very important, and to speak about what was happening between Italy and Libya. And actually we discovered that we didn't know that what happened to them was connected what our government was doing, and they didn't know that what happened to them was because of our government. So we understood together during the workshop that we could have been useful to one another. And we filmed in 2-3 weeks. I think. And then we start to edit for at least 5-6 months, because there were someone connected to the project was convinced that was necessary to go to Libya to film. But we thought that was not necessary, that what we had in the interviews inside the kitchen was the center of the narration, and so the editing was quite long. Took a long time to understand how to build.
Yeah, the image that you have seen of the desert has been shot by ANDREA in his previous documentary, where we met for the first time, and I've seen his documentary on At Sud di Lampedusa, south from Lampedusa, and that is how I knew ANDREA, and that interested me to collaborate with him. And those images, the first time I saw the pictures or the images of the desert, I selected them reminding all the past, all the desert, and even though he has shot those films, those images in the other part of the desert, there are some resemblance among these places that I have traveled. So we put inside those images so that to resolve the question about going back to Libya. And we were not that much convinced because the situation wouldn't have guaranteed my situation to
well, even mine, because they didn't allow me to go to film in Libya, so I didn't have the
permit.
visa, the permit.
Yeah.
So if you guys had been able, like legally, to travel to Libya to film, would you have wanted to, or?
But
our situation,
our situation is different. So
too different.
I could have a visa to go to Libya, but simply as a tourist.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to go as a tourist and then to go to film in a secret way with camera, all these things. I don't like this kind of adrenalinic documentary, heroic documentary filmmaking. And for him it was impossible because now you have a permit of journey. No, but at that time you didn't also.
No, I didn't have.
But was impossible for an asylum seeker asking the asylum in Italy because of the journey through Libya to have a visa to go back to Libya.
If you have some questions, we are here so that we can.
But actually, I think that so a part of the legal procedure and a part of the problems connected with visa and permits and so on, we were really convinced that the center of the film was the memory, was the telling of what happened to you, and not to show. Because I think that in our society we are too used to believe only when we see, but it's not true, and they make us believe only because they can show us, no? But it's not true. So you understand, and you really understand something when you listen to an experience of someone. You don't need to see. It's a different perspective of.
Even though the same thing, if the cameraman or the director goes there, it's his point of view. He can never meet the right thing that those testimonies has already lived. This is the power of the memory, as he has said, Andrea.
Many journalists spoke about the film as a scoop. It's incredible, how did you get this information? And we answer simply in a kitchen in Rome.
Yeah.
Because we simply asked to the ones who were on this journey to tell us what happened. But everybody was speaking about, so the film was quite successful around then. Everybody was speaking about the film as an incredible discovery. And everyone was convinced that they told me, how did you get in the detention center? But there is no one single picture of the detention center. But you have the impression that you was there, because you are with the people who are telling you what happened to them. And so I simply did what a journalist should do. So I asked the direct witness to tell about what happened. Exactly as when if you realize a documentary about unemployment, you speak with the former workers. Okay, I did really the basic step of a journalist's work, but our colonialist perspective put us in a terrible position that we don't know if we don't see there. Because what does it mean? That we don't believe on the direct witness of the migrants. We don't trust, and we listen we listen always the politicians speaking about migration, but we don't listen the direct witnesses.
Yeah.
Or they ask always DAGMAWI to go to television because he speaks Italian. So they call me, they ask me, do you know someone who speaks well Italian to speak in television? Okay, I mean, if you make an interview with the British Prime Minister, you don't ask him to speak on Italian. You have a translator. No? So if you invite a migrant, you will have a translator to understand what is saying. But they want migrants who speaks well Italian, because in television it's important to speak well Italian.
What was it like to interview the lawmakers that were kind of,
sidestepping in the question.
yeah, was there like a sense of frustration when you were in it? Like, how did you feel doing that? Like, hearing the testimonies and experiencing these some of these stories for yourself, and then going and speaking to someone who was kind of putting it in like an otherworld context, like disassociating the problem from like almost a sense of reality.
No, it's about Frattini, the former foreign minister.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know him, and I don't have none of the information of his past experience in the his political life. And you should imagine that I arrived, it has been 1.5 years that I am in Italy when I did that interview with Frattini. But it was also facilitated because there was Stefano Liberti always present, our the consul, and he gave us some consulants, journalistic consulants for the film. My questions were only two things, in order that I can react with him, and whatever he says would not be that much important because it has been already told, and he has made his declaration before on the press conference. What surprised me and what surprised more is the Ika Laitinen, the guy with Frontex. My presence there was a surprise for him because I was meant to be the phone man, the phone man.
The sound engineer, the microphone.
Yeah. And he didn't expect a question from me.
So we officially asked a permit to make an interview, and it was a journalistic interview of Stefano Liberti. Me, I was the cameraman, and he was the sound engineer. And we entered there as a troupe.
As a troupe, journalist troupe. So
that's why I was surprised.
He was
genuinely.
He was shocked. Not only surprised, he was shocked because we did not organize how to do it, because we should have given much time to Stefano so that he can do the preliminary questions that are also important to the film. But the main objective there was the answer he gives to me. And he didn't know that I was in Kufra. He didn't know that I was an a refugee, or an ex-prisoner. So that was the moment where I put myself as a testimony, so that to see what his reaction would be when answering, and that is what you have seen on the interview. So for me, I didn't do it either. All the guys who has participated on the testimony, we didn't do it just to get pity, like she said, Fikerta, from telling our story, but it was to say something for those who didn't have the voice, who were still locked in Libya. And that is the point that convinced us to say about our life and about our experience. But the problem is always this. You remain in this history, or you remain blocked in this experience, like if you don't have any other life before and after. So most of the migrant is an exigent person who needs help always. So it remains always in the mentality of the viewer or the Italians that you are the one who has suffered. Of course we have suffered, but we have also other things before experiencing that moment, but also after experiencing. So I don't know if I have answered your question.
Yes, you
Yes?
did.
Okay.
Thank you, first of all. The wonderful tension in the film between memory and forgetting the things you can't remember, and also between telling or not wanting to tell, but feeling compelled to tell, especially in women's testimony. And I was wondering if you could both talk a little bit about what was the hardest part of making the documentary.
Convincing the producers.
What?
Say it loud.
Watching it.
Convincing the producers.
Convincing the producer. But actually the
No,
producer
no.
worked, so there was no producer. But when we tried to convince an official production or a television about the project, we didn't get at all any interest. I think mainly for two reasons. First, because no one but me and he understood why we should film simply in a kitchen and only in a kitchen. There was no reason to make it understandable. It was simply in our mind and what we felt inside that kitchen, and was really difficult to when we after we realized the interviews, we showed some extracts of the shooting to other producers to try to get some money, because we did it with nothing. So maybe more with something, but really near to nothing. But when we showed the extract of interviews in America in a kitchen, so no one was understanding what was in our mind. That was the first reason. The second reason was also a political one. So the Italian television, they didn't want to get any problem at that time. Was really stupid for someone with the responsibility inside public television to produce this kind of denounce. Stupid from a career point of view, of course. And even in Right Free or in other more independent production, to risk something for the migrants was really not a good time to do it. And so both of these reasons were obstacles to the film. This from a production point of view. From an artistic and human point of view, of course, was very difficult for DAGMAWI to speak about what's happened to them deeply, because the interviews. So it's not easy if you think about your life. It's not easy that someone asks you something painful for you, and he asks to you for 1 hour and a half or 2 hours. So you sit down in a room and you speak about something that was really terrible in your life, and you have to speak for 1 hour and more. So it's not really something
on camera.
And actually, what happened after these interviews, some of the protagonists of the film were quite touched by doing this interview, and their behavior with themselves and with the other changed a lot after this interview. That's why we understood that what happened in this kitchen was really important. Then the second step, very difficult from an artistic point of view and directing point of view, was to find the balance in the editing to show the feeling of what happened inside the kitchen. because we knew perfectly what was our emotions during the filming, but it's really difficult to find a way to make the audience understand and feeling what happened during the filming. And I understand. I remember very well the moment when the editor Luca, who was working with us, he was in a moment. He looked at me and he told me, "I don't find the point. So I don't find the. I understood that you felt something in that kitchen, but I don't see it in the images." Mm-hmm. No? And we asked Luca to wait for a couple of days, and we started to work on the film and to try to find the moment of the eyes, the moment of the right word after another one, to mix it with the music, and then there was a moment that it worked, and then we continued. But these kind of things need a lot of time. There are no other instruments, there are no other secrets, so you simply need time to find the detail which helps you to express, to tell a feeling. It's really difficult.
From the production point of view, he has already cited what was the difficulty, but from the point of view, or from my point of view, my relation to some of my friends, some of them, I know them already when I was in Ethiopia, so they are also, we were also in the same neighborhood, and some of them, I have met them in my travel. They had arrived just one year after me, and that is why my position in that school has permitted also to welcome them in such a place, and I was working in that school, Italian school. My problem was how to make them express their feelings without being the one who has done the same travel, because they stop by saying you know it, so they don't go further than, because they are talking the same thing with a guy who have seen and who has experienced the same experience with them. So it took a lot of time to be invisible in some way, and to be careful, and the moment of difficulty was when I asked with the interview with the women, who, even though I have done some travels with women, I haven't seen or I haven't talked a lot with them, and that is the first moment where I discovered how they lived those moments of trouble and sufferance, and it makes me cry sometimes, and sometimes I don't want to see it, even the film, because I remember those moments of how they live it, these women. The men, of course, I lived it, but I don't have that much pain in seeing the interviews of my colleagues or my friends. But when I think about the women, and some women that I have seen in my travel, in my journey, it hurts me, and that was the moment, the difficult moment where I experienced in realizing the documentary.
Thank you also for the film. It was really wonderful for us to be able to come and see it. I live and work in New York at the NYU campus in New York, so just here for a few days. So this was fabulous to be able to be here. I'm a historian. I've also done interviews with people. When you first started talking, I thought, well, this is definitely not my field. But then I remembered I wrote a book about a town on the northeast coast of the United States, which has a large population of immigrants from the Azores and from Portugal, who came over and the race politics with their transition to the United States. What I found when I did the interviews in a town where I worked was differing memories about how people experience their history in the town. And I was wondering if you came across moments where people remember things differently, and if so, how you resolved that.
There were some moments where knowing that the political relation of Gaddafi with Italy in order to block the migrants, and I'm against his way of seeing the situation in his country. There were a lot of friends of mine who approves his way of governing Libya, because they think, and maybe at the time it was not the right idea to have, they think that the Libyans are worse than Gaddafi. They think that the most sufferance they bear is not because Gaddafi, but because of the Libyan people. So they don't point. So this is a moment where I believe that Gaddafi is still responsible and uses the migrants for his own advantage, and I don't exclude him from being responsible for all the sufferance of the African. But nowadays, seeing that in Libya nothing has changed, even worsened the situation of the migrants, worse than the one we have lived. I think that these were the moments where, with some of my friends, I don't agree, but I try to concentrate on the testimonies and make them see, however, that every governor or responsible or president has his own responsibility on conducting such kind of operation against the migrants. And I told them in order not to convince them, but to let them see what I see, who is responsible. This is, I think, your questions. No, your question is about how I try to resolve the problem of point of view on a certain situation.
The question was also linked to what we decided to do when some of the protagonists remember something in a different way from some other. No? And that happened, of course, but I have two different answers. The first one is, in a narrative documentary, not in a journalistic documentary, I don't think there are fake memories. The memories are important always. It's not important if there is something that is not comprovabile, verifiable, is from an historical point of view or political point of view. I need to be responsible in front of the rule that the documentary is playing in denouncing something. So I have to verify something, okay? But at the same time, if I find that something is not completely true, but is told by someone who is remembering it in a true way to himself, I think that I can put this memory in the film. No? So of course, there is a balance between the two things. But so that's the first answer. Second answer, we built the film as a collective, unique journey. No? You have the impression that everyone is doing the same journey. No? That it's like a group of 10 persons traveling together. It's not true. They travel in different moments, in different steps. Some of them did a part of the journey in the same moment, but we decided to took from each part of every interview, from several parts of every interview, the parts useful to build this collective journey. That's what we understood. Then we edited, so we published in a book, which is only on Italian, also the integral interviews of the single individual experiences.
Maybe now I understood what you meant by asking me, that everybody has done his own experience in such a journey, because my experience could not fit with another one, even though I have traveled a lot of my segments or my travels with a friend. He might look it or he might remember it in a different way. The sufferance, it depends on the background, what you grasp from that moment and what the other might not see. So, as he said, we used different. What was the point of the documentary is to see, not to investigate how much we were truly narrating, but it's about letting the people be narrate their own memory. That is.
I found when I wrote the history of this town, I almost did a similar thing in the sense that I had to turn to the interviews after. So after writing the narrative of the history of the town, where I used some of the interviews, but used a lot of other material as well, the interviews in and of themselves are so rich that it became a second project.
As our book was somehow a second step.
So how important, though, was the aspect of denunciation? Because the film was about memory and how people, they sort of reconstruct their memory of their experience. And also an important part of the film was also, sort of a denunciation of Italian and European Union, policies, affecting refugees. So how did you weight those? And I think that you mentioned that you had just sort of discovered together this kind of political angle. And so did that precede sort of you embarking on the film project, or is that something that grew out of it?
The denunciation was one of the main goals of the film, and was also the reasons why the protagonist accepted to take part of the project. Because actually what happened was really that we were around the table. They started, DAGMAWI and other guys and women who were in the journey, and not only the protagonists of the film, also other guys who didn't take part to the project, to the film. They started to explain us the journey. This on a map, exactly as we filmed. They started to explain the journey from Kufra to Ajdabiya to Benghazi, and then you go back, sent by container to Kufra, and then you try again. And we didn't know anything about this journey. And I perfectly remember the moment when we realized that they were telling us something that we didn't know, and we were telling them that they were victims of our government, because they didn't know. They didn't know that what happened to them was connected to what Italian work was doing. Italy government was doing. Some of them knew something about Italian government was giving trucks or cars, so that there is an agreement, something like that, but they didn't know exactly what was the political discussion, the political debate, and they discovered it only when they arrived in Italy, when they started to speak with us. So we actually understood together in the same moment that we were a meeting, we were a reunion, not non prevista, not preview by the Italian government somehow, no? That we had informations which could be together and very useful each one to another, but and so we had the instruments to start a denunciation to show the consequences of something that was largely discussed in the public arena, because what Berlusconi was saying in television was something everywhere, no? So it was something very, very largely discussed, and everybody was speaking about we have to cooperate with Gaddafi to stop the migrants because there are too many arriving in Lampedusa, and was something very common both in right and left parties. So also the Democratic Party was so they agreed with the treatment with Libya, because it was very important to cooperate with the transit countries in order to prevent the large number of illegal migrants landing in Lampedusa. That was the common discussion, and we are still on that discussion.
Yes.
We didn't move. So
exactly.
that is, and that's why the title "South and North of Lampedusa" it's very correct title, because it's trying to move us out of Lampedusa. Mm-hmm. And my suggestion is the next time we should also cancel Lampedusa somehow.
Okay.
Because Lampedusa, I'm really sorry for Lampedusa, because Lampedusa it's a fake and empty symbol. Mm-hmm. So he didn't land to Lampedusa. Mm-hmm. He was picked up from the Coast Guard, and they brought him to Lampedusa, and then they moved him from Lampedusa to another port. Mm-hmm. So it's not true that migrants are landing in Lampedusa.
They're not.
No? So
the boats do not arrive there.
98% of the migrants they don't land in Lampedusa. They are picked up from the Italian Coast Guard or from the Libyan Coast Guard if they are in the Libyan waters, and they are brought to Sicily or to Lampedusa. But this symbol of Lampedusa and the large number of migrants landing in Lampedusa, it's exactly what prevent us to understand what is happening. But the discussion is still only on that. Mm-hmm. How many migrants landed to Lampedusa last year? 150,000. Okay, we have to reduce the number. But what there is before the journey, how is the journey, what is the condition in the transit country, how is the condition in the origin country, there is no discussion at all. And there is no discussion of what is happening north to Lampedusa, which is another issue we can't open on this table, around this table now. And so our goal was to denounce our ignorance. That was exactly the ignorance which we understood in the moment they started to explain the journey on that table in that school. And was a large ignorance of, so no Italians had any idea of what we showed. No, we didn't show. We told in the film, and of course the large distribution, diffusion, and success of the film was connected to this ignorance, because the Italians started to understand what was happening watching the film, and of course there was a big silence from the politicians. They didn't react to the film, even if we show the film in the parliament. We were invited in the Senate, we were invited in the camera in the parliament, but there were like 3-4 parliament members. And we showed the film to the parliament members when they were signing the treatment with Gaddafi, and 89% of the parliament members, they signed, they agreed with the treatment. And we tried to speak with them to show the film, but they told us there was something important to tell to the Italians, that the Italian government was ready to solve the problem of the migration and to reduce the number of the migrants in Lampedusa. That is a part. That is another step should be to speak about how irrelevant is the number of the migrants arriving in Lampedusa, because the numbers is really, statistically speaking, is really low. It's a little number, so it's small
illegal
number.
migration is overstaying visas. It's a very small
Yeah,
percentage
of course, but there is a lot of other ways to reach Europe, and not only Lampedusa, but Lampedusa it's a perfect media symbol, and that's why I'm really sorry for Lampedusa. I went to Lampedusa only once because I wanted to see Lampedusa only once, and I simply visited the cemetery of the boat cemetery where all the boats were assembled. Yeah. But then so they invited me a lot of time in Lampedusa, but I never want to go there, because for me it's really pity for them, because they don't have any kind of responsibility, but they are the symbol of migration, both from a progressist side or racist rhetoric of invasion and so on. To both sides, they are a symbol, and there are a lot of demonstration festival and music festival and cinema festival. We discussed a lot about that with DAGMAWI, but they should be free of this symbol.
It's also interesting how the Italian state is using Lampedusa for manipulating the discourse, right? Which is a little island in the middle of the ocean belonging to Sicily. There are many layers there. It's a symbol, and it's.
They're still waiting for the Gulf camp in Lampedusa, because
we're told that I'm going to be the Gulf
promised Gulf camp
and
a resort.
Of course.
In Lampedusa to relaunch the tourism.
Tourism in Lampedusa.
And there are a lot of European Lampedusas and African Lampedusas, which are definitely much more important to understand what it's really the topic of this story. The main.
Many Lampedusas.
A friend of mine, a Senegalese friend of mine, who is working now in the Quirinale building, so the palace. The Quirinale is the president of Republic Palace. He's working. He's a Senegalese guy. He's working in the Scuderia del Quirinale. It's the museum of the Quirinale, and he's one of the chief of the security in the Quirinale museum. And he arrived illegally 15 years ago. Now he's married with an Italian woman. He has 2 children. And he's working for the President of the Republic. And every time he says to me, "Do you think if I tried to go to the Italian embassy in Dakar, asking, may I work for the President of the Republic, they could give me the visa to come?" That is, of course, un'esagerazione. Exaggeration. But this sentence makes you understand, if you think about it, which is the main problem. The main problem that there are no legal, regular way to move from some part of the world, and so you move in an illegal way. If you build this legal way, the organization inside the region community of migrants will try to use this legal way to make travel the ones who can travel, and the illegal ways they will reduce. There will be always someone who is trying, but if you don't have any kind of possibility, of course the number of the ones who are trying to move illegally will be larger and larger, simply because you know perfectly that only 20% of them will reach the goal. And so you send 4 sons because you hope that at least one can arrive. But that is out of discussion. We discuss only about the numbers of migrants landing in Lampedusa.
No. Our two.
What was the effect of that mutual discovery of Italy's complicity, in the story on the protagonists as they sat around that kitchen and learned that now they are, that they've come to find exile and refuge in a country that, in fact, was
working against them?
Italy was not only a country that backed a lot of them, but there is a historic relation with this country. So it's back the film. In fact, starts with that moment of remembering the historic relation among this corn of Africa and Italy. And what surprised me is that at the time, in 100 years or even less than 100 years during the fascist occupation, in Ethiopia, Italy used to recruit Libyan soldiers who are named as askaris. These are soldiers to control these colonies like Ethiopia, and it's funny that now Italy is still using the Libyans to block those who has been once under oppression. So there is a big relationship among the travelers from the Corn of Africa and Italy. And also, it is important to remember also that many of us who come, we don't have the point to arrive in Italy. Italy is just a passage. It's just a way to go towards the Northern European countries, but still remains the relation among if Eritrea and Ethiopia are still two countries divided, is thanks to the colonization project of Italy. And if they are still in war, is it because once there has been a conflict due to this kind of this influence, colonial influence among these countries that has divided places and unified and people that were not unified once. So there is a relation in somehow, and that is the question. That is the when Italy has paid to risarcimento, to how do you call it? Recompensation for the Libyan for the Libyan government as a recompensation for the colonial disaster that has made. She has never done the same thing with these countries that we come from. Right. So it is also an hypocrisy, there is more.
But actually was not a recompensation, was a way to pay before the oil and the gas.
Yeah. But the official news is that.
Of course. They use the rhetoric of recompensation.
Maybe it's worth it to remember also that Libya is Italy's most important trade partner. This is something that
nowadays everything.
Though now it seems it still is, but so
in the last 10 months, the oil and gas, the Libyan oil and gas reduced 80% because there is no more control on the oil fields because the conflict inside is totally open. There is no more government.
But they give us gas more than oil, no?
But also.
Metanodotto, sì,
Gas and
Libyan
oil.
gas. Va bene.
Va bene, grazie.
Thank you so much.